Hi, folks. The body looks like crap, and kind of feels that way too. So I'm going to give you the joy of my afternoon rainbows as you listen to me. It's an interesting time. Um, every now and then, fairly frequently, I'll have several days that are just hard physically. I take pain meds, and the morphine and the tramadol, just some days it seems like they're sugar pills. And often enough, it lines up with the solar wind. And so on those days, I put up with it cheerfully because I figure, hey, this is some good stuff coming in, and you know, everything changes. So no matter what, it feels like now I'm quite confident. It's not that way forever, so I can deal. It's funny how the mind takes comfort in thinking it understands something. And then there are days like this when the solar wind is totally quiet. There's no energy from any kind of a CME, coronal mass ejection, and it just hurts. And so I kind of find myself sitting on the couch, just, leaning back and forth and back and forth. And I don't know what's comforting about that. But there you go. So I figured I'd experiment with it. Normally, my attitude and my idea has been I don't care to record for you when I'm feeling like this. First of all, I don't want you to see me as disabled. I'm not good at all with the energy of sympathy. To me, it's a weakening energy. Empathy, well, that's a different thing, and it's much purer than sympathy. But, it's hard because, see, you all read my vibration. To the extent that you're in heart, you're getting a whole heck of a lot more of a message than just the words that the body picks up. And so it was also a desire not to spread the pain around. But I don't know, I'm bucking that. I don't find that there are any rules that don't have exceptions, and having a flexible perspective on things is just plain fun. You know, doing something that you never did before, and why not? I mean, just for the fun of it, just for the exploration. We're curious beings, aren't we? And it's so hilarious when you stop and think about who we really are. We're source, and we have infinite, what we have all knowledge, just not accessible to 3D very much. And so we're stubborn enough, though, to come in here to take on these bodies and to determine that, hey, I'm going to be who I really am. In spite of the whole society and every other being on the planet thinking this or that can't be done, I say to heck with that. And as long as I'm doing it in a spirit of fun, in a spirit of flow, and following heart, being on the high flying disc, however you want to put it, as long as that's a part of it, it's going to work. And it's got blessing in it. It's the blessing of the state that you're in. And it's nice to not be so tightly tethered to mind, who thinks that because the body's in pain, that means you've got to feel miserable. That's BS. Absolute BS. Now, am I going to get off my high-flying disc to share this? No. I'm going to stick with the reality as I perceive it right now. And I feel really good. And I hope you can perceive that too. Don't let your mind and your opinions and your beliefs and things get in the way of just picking up what's here for you. I've been listening to a lot of Abraham to help me, to lift me up. And it's not that it's lifting me up, it just provides the wind under my wings and makes it easier. That's all. It just reminds us of who we are and what we have available to us, which is everything. And it's so totally amazing how much happiness is there, fully available, once we start to get that breathing space between us and the mind. The mind who's convinced that it knows how things work, and it's very logical and very linear, and it's very self-confident. Well, not so much. I mean, once we start taking the reins of control away from the mind, and I'm finding more and more, let me say this here. It's funny that it just recently came to me, but there you have it. Mind is the tool with which we create. Now, it's not that I'm doing a 180, but I'm kind of figure eighting on this thing, doing a figure eight. And opening up to a new way of viewing things. I still firmly stand by what I've said about needing to get the reins of control back in the hands of the soul or the being, and not in the hands of the mind or the emotions or whatever. And so your intention, you're the one that drives the mind. You have a mind, but most of us were taught that we are the mind. And so once we get into the mode where we realize, oh my God, I have a mind and I can drive it much like a car. And it's a wonderful thing. Some of us have a VW and some of us have a Lexus or a Lamborghini or whatever your dream vehicle is, But it's in our control, as is our attitude. And so it just changes the whole view of life. It changes everything. But lately, to me, mind is actually getting more and more precious, more and more valuable, as I see what a fine tool it is, and how amenable to change it is. Once it gets over the idea of being in control, and that's a challenge because it's powerful and it's stubborn and it's brilliant. And like I said in my last journal, there's a lot of people that have actually been tricked by the mind, pretending to be spiritual. And those that are in heart will be enabled to see through this. And so don't fear and don't worry, because what you fear you bring to you just as much as what you desire. It's funny how that works, but in the backwards realm that is 3D, I'm just not surprised anymore when I see things working counterintuitively, if you will. I mean, there's a certain kind of intuition that mind has, and then there's the deeper and deeper levels of intuition and inner tuition, inner teaching that we come upon as we delve into our core, into our center. God, aren't the rainbows heavenly? Amazing, totally amazing. Do whatever lifts you up. Whatever it is. I might have at most maybe a couple of $100 of crystal in the window there, and It was gained over a long period of time. There were no great expenditures on that. And for the pretty much daily elevation and joy that I experience from that small expenditure, it's like an, oh my God. It takes me to heaven. I can't tell you the number of times it brings me into tears of gratitude and joy. And it's not just the crystal, because the crystal sitting there all by itself doesn't do anything. It's the combination, it's the joining up, the meeting of the crystal and the sunlight that presents this. Light is light and water are the most amazing things I find in 3D. The depth of it is as deep as you want to go. The light actually contains information. And it's nice to see the light split out into the frequency bands. That's what that is. You know, each of those colors is a different frequency of light. And that's nice. That's a certain layer of information. But oh my God, we can delve so much deeper. Trying to think of who the German philosopher was. I recently, well, what's recently? Time is so stretchable, you know. In one of my vids, I gave you about an hour-long presentation. There was a German philosopher that studied light on his own for a period of about 40 years. He really got into it. And he had really non-Newtonian ways of looking at things. He came from a different perspective. And I love the things that he discovered. For instance, when you have a light box, and so you've got a window and the sunlight comes in, and you've got a box that has a hole to let the sun in. Now, it's really interesting that, you know, you've got one side of the box with plexiglass or glass, and so you can see into it. So you don't see, if you look into the box, you don't see any light. You don't see any color. You don't see anything. But on the far end of the box, opposite the window, you see an image. A sphere of light. Well, a lot of us would think, well, that's because the hole that the sunlight's coming through is round. And so, of course, you're going to have a round image. Well, this guy put a square hole, a triangular hole. He tried different shapes, and it didn't matter. The image was always circular. And he understood that the sun was somehow contained in the light. And that's what we were seeing. It was circular because the sun was circular. Now that's a different way of looking at light, isn't it? I'll fish around and I'll find that link again. It's really beautiful. And he's a very well-known philosopher. I don't know why his name doesn't come to mind. But that's okay. You'll see it in the links that I put with this. Everything's deeper than mind has the ability to see initially. And that's why it's really good that there's so many of us and that we're not the same. We're not clones. And we all have our own peculiar perspective on things. And as we get together, and Ra calls it teach learning or learn teaching, because it's always both, you know. There's nobody that you don't have something to teach and that they don't have something to teach you. It's just not a possibility, because we're all whole, we're all one. And to experience the depth of that oneness is to welcome one another into our world. And to be open to other perspectives. When I was young, I used to laughingly say that I was prejudiced. Very happily so, and I had a prejudice not against something, but in favor of something. And what was that something? Anyone who was a quote-unquote foreigner. I was totally fascinated to talk to listen to learn from, to listen to all the beautiful accents that came from their home language. And I was just drawn to it. I wanted different ways of seeing life. I came in like that. This flexible perspective thing isn't something that I can claim that I've picked up along the way. I feel like I brought it with me. But then the whole thing gets down to the definition of me, doesn't it? And we've been taught to identify with a very limited aspect or portion of who and what we are. And as long as we do that, we're self-limiting there. See, that's the joy and the beauty. We get to choose. We get to pick and choose among everything that's available what brings us joy. And so we drive our, we're in control. We hold the reins. And we set up boundaries. And we determine, I am going to be in joy. And that's just the way of it. And we learn how easy it is if we're not firmly seated in heart, firm in our joy. We can hold a conversation with someone and be brought down. It's not that they are bringing us down either. That would always be mind if there's any blame involved. It's just the logical mind trying to work it out. Just let that go. Just ignore it. We didn't love ourselves enough and love our state enough to maintain it. There's nothing that says you have to be friendly with everybody. There's nothing that says you have to welcome everybody into your space. And sometimes the best thing you can do for someone, if you can't keep your state in their presence, is to walk away. You're actually serving them by doing that, because if they're down, you coming down does nothing to raise them up. You're not helping by sympathizing with someone. You're really not. But mind doesn't see this. This is on a deeper layer. We have infinite layers and levels of being to access. We are multidimensional doesn't even cut it, hardly. The depth that's available to us is actually infinite. Creation is infinite. There's not a time ever when we didn't exist. We just are. And it doesn't pay, in my book anyway, it doesn't pay to try to put an image on Source or God, because anything that has an image is limited in time and space. It's got boundaries. It's got edges. And Source isn't like that. Not at all. And so some things are better not thought about. Instead, you feel Source. You experience it directly. And whatever level of understanding is there doesn't matter. Because your joy comes from within. We are rising above the levels that we used to occupy on a regular basis for the decades of our life. We're rising in frequency and vibration, and that changes the lay of the land too. That makes things look really different. And in a funny sort of a way, that gives more definition to us, to who and what we are. We're almost forced to define it in order to defend it. And I don't like those words in the least. Let me do that again. What I'm discovering is that as I interact with people, I'm learning more and more about myself based on my response to them and based on my feelings. And so I'm truly getting to know the self more. Now, I don't know why the camera is doing that. There is no changing of the physical light in this room. But that's okay, the poor dear. I don't have it on autofocus because that would drive you nuts. There's nothing for it to focus on. So I won't be concerned with that. We are infinite. And the sooner we ditch all of the self-limiting beliefs, the better. And so take them one at a time, take them 10 at a time, take them whatever lights your fires, you know, whatever feels right, go for it. And don't look to others for how to trim your sail or set your course. Art Fantasies put up a recent video where he said no gurus needed, and I agree. I don't listen to Abraham in the least as a guru. And what I enjoy so much, and I've listened to enough hundreds of hours of it now, that what I'm seeing is that whoever's on the hot seat there speaking with Abraham, Abraham looks at that one with infinite love and doesn't see them physically so much as seeing them energetically, vibrationally. Abraham is able to see who they really are. And so as they're looking at them, they're reflecting back to them who and what they really are. And they're so fine-tuned that they know how much the person can take. Because if you give someone too much light, you're not doing them any favors. It'll overwhelm, and it'll create resistance. Not create it, but it will discover within them a layer or a level of resistance. And it's a really beautiful thing. We're learning to see the self that way, aren't we? To see the self as the divine. To see our true nature as the wholeness of Source. That's who and what we are. And I believe the example Abraham quietly sets is to look at each one of us like that. And so, seeing us not as we are or as we think we are, seeing right through all of our beliefs to who and what we truly are. I believe that's the way Jesus healed. When he looked at a person, he didn't see any sort of disease. He saw the perfection that was there. And to the extent that that person could believe and have faith, they were healed. He never said, I healed so-and-so. He told people, it was your faith that healed you. We're way more in charge than we've been taught to believe. And that's tremendously empowering, the way I see it. There's not a down thing in it. None of it's down. None of it's negative. Oh, and I'll attach another video where somebody asked Abraham about the Japanese earthquake and the devastation that was wrought by that, and all the people that died, and all the suffering, and yada, 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 and how did those people precipitate that? What was that all about? I'm not going to tell you. I'm going to give you the link and let you enjoy it from the really high space occupied by Abraham, so that you can get their frequency and vibration. Now, Abraham is everywhere present, just like you are and I am. We're all one. This separation illusion thing is on its way out in our awareness. Abraham is present now, present to all of us, and available to all of us, and sees us as the very highest of our, it's not even our potential, it's who we really are. It's not a potential thing, it's who we really are. Now, it's a potential to precipitate that into 3D, but that already exists. It's not like it doesn't exist. And so, get used to being looked at like that and realize that you have connection with not just Abraham, with any being of light, any being that's crossed over. We're communicating on levels of which the mind isn't aware, the conscious mind. But we can become aware of it if we choose to do that. Now, some people, this will scare the heck out of them, and no thanks will be their answer, and hey, I support that. The most important thing for each of us is to follow our bliss, not somebody else's. The thing is, though, that there are so many of us and such joy abounding that there are many with whom we can harmonize. We might not be on the same note, but whatever note we're on, we can harmonize with one another. And so the sorting out, the great shifting, could be called the great sifting, the separation of the wheat and the tares, only it's not that the wheat is good and the tares are bad. That's just a linear way of looking at things, and really it's nonsense. It's a game of the mind to think that anything could be bad. There is wellness abounding. There is beauty and joy and bliss abounding. It's a matter of tuning into it, my friends. We're vibrational beings. That means we're frequency beings. It's a matter of learning how to tune the dial of our own consciousness. And it's doable, and it's one heck of a lot of fun. Talk to you again soon. I take pain meds, and the morphine and the tramadol, just some days it seems like they're sugar pills. And often enough, it lines up with the solar wind. And so on those days, I put up with it cheerfully, because I figure, hey, this is some good stuff coming in, and, you know, everything changes, so no matter what, it feels like now I'm quite confident. It's not that way forever, so I can deal. I figured I'd experiment with it. Normally, my attitude and my idea has been, I don't care to record for you when I'm feeling like this. First of all, I don't want you to see me as disabled. I'm not good at all with the energy of sympathy. To me, it's a weakening energy. Empathy, well, that's a different thing, and it's much purer than sympathy. But, you know, it's hard because, see, you all... Hi, folks. The body looks like crap and kind of feels that way too. So I'm going to give you the joy of my afternoon rainbows as you listen to me. It's an interesting time. Every now and then, fairly frequently, I'll have several days that are just hard physically. It's funny how the mind takes comfort in thinking it understands something. And then there are days like this when the solar wind is totally quiet. There's no energy from any kind of a CME, coronal mass ejection, and it just hurts. And so I kind of find myself sitting on the couch just, you know, leaning back and forth, and I don't know what's comforting about that, you know. But there you go. So I'll read my vibration to the extent that you're in heart, you're getting a whole heck of a lot more of a message than just the words that the body picks up. And so it was also a desire not to spread the pain around, you know? But I don't know, you know, I'm bucking that. I don't find that there are any rules that don't have exceptions. And having a flexible perspective on things